They said love could move mountains, but they never told me it could carve out your ribs and rip out a part of your body while you smiled through the agony. When I handed over my liver to Roger, it wasn't just an organ. It was everything: my faith, my devotion, my belief that we were building something unshakable. I didn't sign up to be a footnote in his story. I thought I was the story, but the pain they warned me about wasn't the worst part. It wasn't the vomiting or the fevers or the moments I stared at the ceiling wondering if my heart would give out before my body healed. It was waking up alone. It was checking my phone and seeing no missed calls, no flowers at my bedside, no "I love you, thank you for saving my life." It was being told, just weeks after I gave him a second chance at breathing, that Roger was getting married. To my cousin, Loretta, the same Loretta who once sat beside me crying over her high school breakup, who called me her sister, who braided my hair the morning of my graduation. The same girl who watched me limp around with stitches in my side while smiling like she had no secrets. I donated part of my liver to save the man I loved, and he used his second chance to betray me in the most humiliating way possible. You think you'll scream when you hear something like that, throw something, collapse. But I didn't. I just sat there frozen. I pressed my hand over the scar that still hadn't healed and whispered the same question over and over again: how could he? I had risked death for him, and he gave my future away like it was nothing. That was the moment something in me snapped. Not the weak part, the strong part, the part that had been sleeping all along. Because if Roger thought I was just a quiet girl with a bleeding heart, he was about to find out what I could do when I stopped bleeding. People always said Roger was the kind of man who walked into a room and made everyone stop talking. It wasn't just his looks, though that was part of it: tall, broad shoulders, that easy smile that said he didn't need to try hard to be noticed. But it was the way he carried himself, like the world owed him space, like he knew something you didn't. And I was the girl in the corner who always noticed too much and said too little. I met him during my second year of nursing school. He was getting his car towed outside the hospital, and I watched him argue with the driver like he had a million more important things to do. He was furious, and somehow, still charming. I made some dry joke as I passed, and he turned, stunned. "You think this is funny?" he asked. I shrugged. "A little." "You parked in a red zone." He blinked, then he laughed, full unapologetic. He asked for my number right there on the street. I gave it to him, mostly because I was tired of doing everything right and getting nowhere. We went for coffee the next evening. Coffee turned into dinner, dinner into long walks, weekend trips, conversations so intimate. It felt like I was being rewired just by hearing him speak. He listened when I talked, not the way most men pretend to. Roger listened. He called me smart, like it was a compliment, not a warning. He said things like, "You ground me, Denise. I never knew what calm felt like until you." I fell hard. He wasn't perfect. He had moments where he got distant. Sometimes he'd cancel plans or disappear into work for days, and I'd catch him staring at his phone like it knew more about him than I ever would. But then he'd kiss my forehead and say, "I'm just tired. Don't worry, baby. I've got you." And I believed him. When the diagnosis came, we were supposed to be planning a trip. Something simple, just the two of us in a cabin by the lake. But instead, we were sitting in a hospital room with two white lights and a doctor speaking in words that didn't sound real. Severe liver failure, early stages, but fast progressing. I couldn't breathe. Roger stared at the floor. He didn't ask any questions, just nodded slowly like he'd expected it. When the doctor left, I looked at him and said the only thing I could: "We'll fix it." He didn't say anything, just took my hand and squeezed it. The donor list was long, too long. The nurse mentioned live donation like it was an afterthought, a dangerous, complicated afterthought. And yet, before anyone could say another word, I spoke. "Test me." The nurse looked at me like I didn't understand. "It's not a small surgery, miss," I said. "Test me." Roger's head snapped toward me. "Denise." I shook my head. "Don't argue with me." I passed the compatibility tests. My liver was a near-perfect match. My mother begged me to reconsider. My friends told me I was insane. Even Loretta, my sweet, supportive cousin, called me up one night with concern in her voice. "You're doing a lot, Dee. Are you sure he'd do the same for you?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. Of course he would. But I didn't sleep that night. The surgery date came fast. I signed documents I barely read, my hands trembling as I wrote my name over and over again. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and something heavier, something like fear. Roger kissed my hand before they wheeled me in. "Thank you," he whispered. I closed my eyes and thought about the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. I thought about that night in the rain when we got soaked walking home. But he made it feel like a movie. I thought about every time I looked at him and saw forever. The pain after the surgery was unbearable. No one prepares you for how much it hurts to give something away that was supposed to stay inside you forever. I woke up groggy, every breath a scream in disguise. Nurses hovered, machines beeped, morphine dripped, and through it all, I waited for Roger. He came, but only briefly. He smiled, told me I was amazing, said I was his miracle. Then he left, saying he needed rest too. Days turned into weeks. My recovery was slow. I couldn't stand without help, couldn't sleep through the night without curling into a ball around the pain. He visited less and less. I told myself he was healing, that once we were both stronger, things would go back to how they were. I was wrong, because the last time I saw him in that hospital room, he kissed my forehead and said, "I owe you everything." But what he really meant was, "I owe you nothing at all." The call came on a Thursday afternoon, just as I was struggling to sit upright without help. My nurse had just left the room, and the TV was humming in the background with a rerun of some cooking show. I wasn't really watching. My phone buzzed on the side table. It was Loretta. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, not since the surgery. She'd texted once praying for a fast recovery. "Love you always," but after that, silence. I swiped to answer, expecting small talk or maybe an offer to visit. But the moment I heard her voice, something felt off. Too high-pitched, too cheerful. "Denise," she squealed, as if we were 13 again. "Guess what?" I shifted against the pillows, wincing. "What?" "I'm engaged," she said. It took me a second to process. Engaged? Loretta had been single for months. To who? I asked, already feeling a tightness in my chest I didn't like. There was a pause. Then she said it. "To Roger." I thought I'd misheard her. "Sorry, what?" "To Roger," she repeated, her voice still glowing. "I know, it's crazy, right? It all just kind of happened. One minute we were talking, and the next he's getting down on one knee." I blinked at the wall, heart hammering. "Roger, my Roger?" Another pause. Then softer, awkward now. "Well, I mean, he's not yours anymore, Dee." I didn't speak. Couldn't. "You guys broke up a while ago, right?" she said quickly. And I swear I didn't mean for anything to happen. But after everything he went through, we just got close. It was unexpected, but it feels real. My voice was barely a whisper. "Does he know?" "Know what?" "That I gave him part of my liver." She was silent. "He never told you," I said. "Not a question, Denise. I didn't realize you were his donor," she murmured. "I knew you had surgery, but he just said it was some medical situation. He didn't give me details." I hung up. I stared at the ceiling until the beeping of my phone started to feel like a metronome counting down everything I'd just lost. Not just my health, not just the months of recovery, but Roger and Loretta, both of them, behind my back, building a life together while I was still learning to walk again. I checked his socials. There were no posts, no announcements, but I scrolled far enough back to see the comments. "Power couple. So happy for you too. He looks so much better now." One photo caught my eye. It was of them on a rooftop, city skyline behind them, her hand proudly displaying a ring. The caption, "Through everything, we found each other." I stared at that picture for hours. He had used my body to survive, and he gave his heart to someone else while I was still bandaged and bruised, clinging to the lie that we were healing together. The next morning, I asked for early discharge. The nurses hesitated, warning me I wasn't strong enough yet, but I insisted. I signed the forms with trembling hands and packed my things in silence. When I got home, I dropped everything in the middle of the living room and collapsed onto the couch. My scar ached, my ribs throbbed, but none of it hurt as much as knowing he had moved on, like I was a temporary inconvenience. I thought maybe he'd reach out, explain, apologize, at the very least acknowledge me. He didn't. 3 days passed. Then 5. I finally texted him. Just one line. "Is it true?" He read it, didn't reply. That night, I opened the drawer where I'd kept every card he'd written me, every photo, every note he'd left on my bathroom mirror. I threw them all away. But I couldn't throw away the part of him still inside me, the part keeping him alive, and that was the part I hated most. The betrayal didn't end with silence. It deepened, because 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived at my door, cream-colored, gold-trimmed, no return address. Inside was a wedding invitation. Roger and Lortai are invited to celebrate our union. I didn't even finish reading it. My body shook as I sat on the floor. The paper crumpled in my fist. He didn't just leave me. He wanted me to watch. Every morning felt heavier than the one before. I'd wake up on the couch because the bed felt too empty, too wide, too cruel. The living room stayed dark, curtains drawn, lights off, silence thick like fog, and I barely moved except to sip water or force down half a piece of toast. My body was still healing, the scar tight and raw across my side, but it was nothing compared to the pain that didn't show. I kept hearing their voices. Not in the haunted kind of way, just the memory of them laughing, whispering. Loretta saying it just happened. Like love could be an accident. Like betrayal was an oops. And Roger's silence in my inbox said more than any message ever could. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was humiliation. I had stripped myself bare, risked my life for him, and he hadn't even given me the decency of a conversation. I stopped answering calls. Lisa, my best friend, came by a few times. She'd knock softly, call my name, and eventually let herself in with the spare key. She'd sit beside me and talk while I stared at the wall. You can't let them do this to you, Denise, she said once, her voice a shaky blend of frustration and heartbreak. You're worth more than this. I need you to believe that. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But everything inside me felt broken. Like the part of me that knew how to fight had been drained out with the anesthesia. I hated mirrors. I couldn't look at my own body without seeing the line across my skin and thinking, this was the cost. He had walked away with a second chance. I had been left with a scar and a silence that never stopped screaming. Sometimes I'd try to journal. Like my therapist once suggested, I'd write one sentence and rip out the page. I gave him everything. He gave me nothing. And I still miss him. I felt pathetic. There was a moment, one that still feels like it belongs to someone else, where I sat on the bathroom floor with the bottle of painkillers the hospital had given me. My hand trembled as I picked it up. It wasn't that I wanted to die. I just didn't want to feel anymore. The thought of waking up another day, of seeing their wedding photo float across some family group chat, of pretending to be fine when everything inside me was in pieces, it felt unbearable. I don't remember how long I sat there, knees to my chest, bottle in my hand. I cried until my throat burned, until my body gave up and I collapsed sideways against the cold tile. I must have fallen asleep there, because when I opened my eyes, the morning sun was peeking through the window, and for some reason, I was still here, alive, breathing. I sat up slowly, my body aching in every place imaginable, and stared at the half-full bottle. That's when the whisper came, not out loud, not even a thought exactly, just this flicker. Get up. So I did. I flushed the pills, washed my face, stared into the mirror and forced myself to trace the scar with my fingers. It was ugly, uneven, angry red against my skin, but it meant I'd survived, and that was something. I didn't leave the apartment that day, or the next, but I did one small thing every morning. Open the curtains, walk a little longer, make tea instead of just water. Lisa noticed. She started bringing me groceries instead of takeout, soap with lavender, a journal with a new pen, a note that said, the story doesn't end here. Still, I couldn't shake the ache that had rooted itself deep in my chest. One night, the silence got to be too much. I walked to the bridge near my building, just to stand there, just to feel something that wasn't pain. The wind was sharp, slicing across my skin like knives, and I leaned over the railing, watching the water swirl below. It looked peaceful, quiet, still. I closed my eyes, but when I stepped forward, something stopped me. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a hand. It was me, the part of me I thought I'd lost. The one that remembered how it felt to laugh so hard I couldn't breathe. The one that used to dream about writing, traveling, starting my own clinic someday. That part whispered, you are not done yet. I stepped back, and I wept, not because I was still broken but because I realized, maybe for the first time, that broken wasn't the same as destroyed. After the bridge, something shifted. Not all at once, not in some dramatic movie moment way, but slowly, quietly, like a bruise finally starting to fade. I didn't tell anyone what happened that night, not even Lisa, but when she saw me cleaning out the fridge the next morning, Her eyes welled with tears. She didn't ask questions, just hugged me a little tighter. That was the day I deleted Roger's number, blocked him on everything. I threw out the last hoodie he'd left behind, packed up the picture frames. Every reminder of him gone.it felt like ripping off a bandage. But healing doesn't wait for your permission. It starts in the background. Even when you're not paying attention. A month later, I was walking to a nearby cafe when I saw Loretta's name trending in a local blog post. A wedding announcement. Some influencer list covering luxury bridal features in the city. There she was, in lace and tulle, smiling like she'd won something. And beside her, Roger, except he didn't look happy. He looked tired. I stared at the picture, my hands shaking, not from hurt, but from something else, something sharper. I wasn't jealous. I was curious, because I knew that look. I had seen it on his face months before the diagnosis. The same hollow expression, the same tight-lipped, fake smile. I started digging, not obsessively, just carefully, quietly. Within days, the pieces started to show. Whispers of complaints from coworkers, an anonymous blog post about a scandal at Roger's company. Terms like misuse of funds and unauthorized reimbursements kept coming up. And then, I heard from Roland. He worked in finance, had quietly stayed in my life since I'd moved into his spare room. We weren't close, not the way Lisa and I were, but there was something steady about him. Reliable, safe. Did you know Roger's under internal investigation? He said over dinner one night, watching me closely. I blinked. No, what for? He shrugged. Nothing public yet, but there's noise, bad accounting, pressure from investors. Loretta's family is trying to keep it quiet. I didn't know what to feel. There had been a time I would have defended Roger. A time I would have wept just hearing his name. But now all I saw was a man who had burned every bridge. And that's when the second twist hit me like a cold slap. Loretta messaged me. Not a text, a handwritten letter, delivered to my door. It was short, barely 2 paragraphs, but the second I read it, I had to sit down. Denise, I didn't know how bad it was until now. He's ruined us, drained my savings, lied about everything. I thought I was different. I thought he loved me. I guess I was just the next version of you. I'm so sorry. I really am. You didn't deserve any of this. Lord, I read it twice. Then again. He had destroyed her too. Used her, bled her dry, just like he had done to me. Only this time, I wasn't the one left broken, and for the first time since the surgery, I smiled. Not out of revenge, not out of cruelty, but because the truth always finds its way to the surface. He had survived on a piece of me, but he couldn't survive without me, and now, he was drowning. I didn't decide to confront him right away. I wanted to. God, I wanted to storm into his life and throw everything at his feet, the betrayal, the lies, the scar he left across my body and my life. But instead, I waited, because I wasn't the girl who once begged him to stay. I was someone else now, and if I was going to face him, I'd do it standing tall. I spent the next few weeks gathering everything. Not just my strength, though that was part of it, but evidence. Quietly, methodically. Roland helped me. He had connections in places where people whispered truths they didn't want public. The picture became clear fast. Roger wasn't just emotionally bankrupt. He was professionally reckless. Fake expense reports, falsified receipts, a private bank account Loretta hadn't known about. He had siphoned off money for months before getting caught, using charm and manipulation to dodge questions. But now the questions were turning into accusations. He was barely holding it together. I could see it in the messages Roland forwarded me, internal memos, investor threats, leadership doubts. The Roger I once knew, the man who said, "I've got you," was circling the drain. So I made a decision, not to destroy him, but to make sure he couldn't destroy anyone else. I compiled everything into a single dossier, clean, organized, airtight. Screenshots, testimonies, transaction records. I didn't leak it yet, not to the press, not to his job, because first, I wanted him to look me in the eyes. To see what he'd lost. I messaged him. Just one line. I think we need to talk. One last time. He replied in less than 10 minutes. Sure, tomorrow at noon. Caf Brilla.it was the same caf where we had our first date. He had picked it on purpose. He thought I was still the same girl who'd fall apart in front of him. He had no idea. When I walked in, I saw him instantly. sitting by the window. He looked like a shadow of himself, thin, tired, nervous. His fingers tapped against the coffee cup in front of him. His eyes lit up when he saw me, and not with guilt, with hope. As if part of him still believed this was a reconciliation. Denise, he said, standing halfway, forcing a smile. You look good. I sat down across from him, slow and calm. You look like someone who's running out of excuses. The smile faltered. I set the manila folder on the table between us. What's this? He asked, frowning. Your second chance, I said, and your last one. He didn't reach for the folder, just stared at it like it might burn him. I know what you did, Roger, at your job, with Loretta, with the money, with the lies. He went pale. Denise, no. I cut in. You don't get to speak yet. He closed his mouth. I almost died for you, I said, my voice quiet but hard. I gave you a part of me, my body, my trust. And while I was in a hospital bed trying to learn how to breathe again, you were off proposing to my cousin and stealing from your company. I never meant to hurt you, he said quickly. You didn't hurt me, I replied. You hollowed me out. His eyes flashed. It wasn't like that. Things with Loretta, they just happened. I didn't plan any of it. You planned every lie you told your boss, I said. You planned every cent you stole. You planned how you'd cover your tracks. Don't tell me you don't plan things, Roger. You're not reckless. You're calculated. You knew what you were doing. He swallowed. So what? You're here to ruin me? I smiled. I'm here to hold you accountable. He opened the folder slowly, flipping through the pages. His hands trembled. This isn't just corporate stuff, he muttered. Where did you get all of this? I'm resourceful, I said simply. Turns out, when you stop crying over someone, you get a lot done. He looked up, jaw clenched. Denise, please, this will destroy me. I know, I said. That's what consequences do. I'll go to jail, maybe. I'll lose everything. You already did. He slumped back in the chair, covering his face with both hands. I didn't think you'd ever do something like this. That's because you never saw me. You never thought I was capable of walking away. He stared at me for a long time, then whispered, Why are you doing this? I leaned forward. Because the girl who gave you her liver thought you were worth saving, and she was wrong. This isn't about revenge. It's about not letting you keep hurting people. Loretta, your co-workers, me. It stops here. He didn't speak again, just stared down at the evidence of his downfall. I stood to leave. He looked up one last time, desperate. Denise, I was lost. I thought I loved you. I thought you were the answer, but I was drowning. No, I said softly. You dragged people under so you didn't have to swim alone. I walked out of the cafe without looking back, and I didn't flinch when I dropped copies of the folder into 3 different mailboxes that afternoon. His boss, the board, and an anonymous reporter. That night, I stood in the shower, water pouring over my scar, and for the first time in over a year, I felt clean, because I had confronted the worst part of my story and rewritten the ending with my own hand. It didn't take long. Less than a week after that meeting at Betrayal, Roger's world began to collapse. The news broke quietly at first, a leaked memo about an ongoing investigation at his company. Then came the reports, articles, forums lighting up with speculation. The financial records I'd sent were making their way into the right hands, and all the questions he had dodged for months were no longer whispers. They were public accusations, and this time, there was no Loretta by his side to shield him, because she left him. Roland told me she'd walked out 2 days after the story broke, packed her things in the middle of the night, and moved back in with her parents. She didn't leave a note, just silence. The same silence Roger had once given me. I found out through Lisa that Loretta had been sobbing for hours before she left, repeating the words I couldn't get out of my head. Back when this all started, I gave him everything. She finally understood what it meant, and I didn't hate her for it. I didn't forgive her either, but I no longer saw her as the villain, just another casualty of the same man who drained me dry. Roger tried to reach out, twice. The first time, it was a voicemail. His voice was shaky, pitiful. He begged for understanding, claimed he never stopped loving me, said he was in a dark place and that everything spiraled after I left. I didn't respond. The second time, it was a letter, a full 4 pages, handwritten. He said he was sorry, that he finally understood what he'd done, that he wished he could go back and choose differently, that I had been his one shot at real love. I burned it, and in that moment, I realized what true closure felt like. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a breakdown. It was indifference. When you can look at the person who shattered you and feel nothing, that's when you know you've healed. Meanwhile, I was living, not surviving living. I'd started a job with a nonprofit health initiative that helped low-income women access post-surgical support. Roland had recommended me, and it turned out my experience wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. I wasn't just some voice on the other end of a brochure. I understood. I had bled and cried and limped through recovery. And now I could help others do the same. Every patient I spoke to reminded me why I was still here. Every scar they showed me reminded me that I wasn't alone. And every time I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and saw that line across my skin, I didn't flinch anymore. That scar wasn't Roger's single quotes it was mine. A symbol not of loss but of survival. And just when I thought my story had reached its final chapter, life surprised me. One crisp Saturday morning, I was at the local bookstore, sipping an overpriced latte and scanning a display of new releases. I heard a voice behind me, low, warm, familiar in a way I couldn't explain. "Never took you for a thriller kind of woman," it said. I turned. Roland? He was wearing a worn leather jacket, eyes kind but cautious. Not the finance nerd blazer he used to wear. He looked relaxed. "Only when the main character burns everything down at the end," I replied with a small smirk. He chuckled. "So basically, your autobiography?" I raised an eyebrow. "You read it?" "I lived parts of it," he said, his smile softening. "And if you ever decide to write it, I'll be the first to pre-order." We sat in the reading nook for an hour, books forgotten, talking about everything and nothing. He didn't bring up Roger, or Loretta, or the scandal. He just asked about me, what I was reading, what I was dreaming of now, where I wanted to go next. And when I told him, anywhere I don't have to be someone's shadow, he didn't flinch. He nodded like he understood completely. Before he left, he hesitated, then handed me a card. Not a business card, a hand-drawn one, sketched with tiny ink stars and a short quote in his familiar handwriting. "You don't owe anyone the soft parts of you that they didn't fight to keep." Underneath it, his number. And no pressure, no expectations, just a door left open. I kept the card, not because I needed saving, but because sometimes life sends you someone who knows how to stand quietly beside you while you save yourself. That night, I lit a candle. Not for him, for me. I poured myself a glass of wine, took out the last piece of the past I hadn't let go of, an old photo of Roger and me, smiling in a park, long before the surgery. I looked at it one final time, then I tore it in half, then in quarters, then into dust. He didn't deserve to be remembered, but I did. I deserved to remember who I became. A woman who gave everything, got nothing in return, and still rose, stronger, smarter, untouchable. Roger lost his job, his reputation, and the last person willing to fight for him, me. I found myself, my voice, my peace, and that, in the end, was the greatest revenge of all.